Okay, welcome everyone. This is our second webinar on aquaculture improvement projects and landscape-based management. My name is Elena and I will be your host for today. I work with the Sustainable Fisheries Partnership to support the market uptake of aquaculture improvement projects to drive environmental improvements of aquaculture at scale. This webinar is the second of a series of 3, and the first one looked at why certification of aquaculture operations is no longer enough to drive meaningful improvements of aquaculture sustainability. So during that webinar, the first one, we had some questions, and the answers that we got back revealed that the majority of the industry is unclear on why, on how AIPs, which stands for Aquaculture Improvement Project, works. And so this webinar was run to address some of the practical aspects that are involved in starting and running aquaculture improvement projects. Right, before I introduce the speakers, I really want to thank the sponsors of the Asian Farm Shrimp Supply Chain Roundtable, which is an association of shrimp importers committed to supporting the uptake of AIPs as a way to drive sustainability in shrimp farming. These companies have really contributed to making this webinar possible. Now I would like to pass on the opening of the webinar to William Davis, who is the Sustainable Sourcing and CSR Manager of the Big Prawn Company and also the Chairman of the Supply Chain Roundtable. So over to you, William, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Elena, and welcome to everyone. Great to have you joining our webinar series. So today is an important day for the environment. It's the opening day of COP27, the UN Summit on Climate Change. And I've been watching some of the discussions, and the emphasis is people asking what's its importance and is it really going to make any difference? And the kind of key message that's coming out of it is that there needs to be collaboration, and in this case between governments around the world. And there can be very positive measures that come out of this collaboration. So AIPs are a collaboration, and they are for the benefit of the environment. And these collaborations can lead to improvements, and understanding the factors that can benefit the environment between aquaculture. So these collaborations are important to me in my business. Shrimp health, the environment, in areas of shrimp farming such as biodiversity, and lastly the reputation and the consumer image of shrimp. So I'm really pleased to have 3 speakers here today. Paul from SFP, Antonio Santa Marta from Longline Environmental, and Trini Pratwini from Asian Seafood Improvement Collaborative. It's going to be great to see how their experiences on collaboration of AIPs and hopefully inspire other AIPs into existence and motivate and learn from them. So Elena is going to introduce the first speaker.
Thank you, William. Great opening statement. Okay, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Paul, who is also my colleague at the Sustainable Fisheries Partnership. The role of Paul Bulkover at SFP is to develop and maintain some of the largest database of information related to aquaculture. He also is the information manager at SFP, but he also supports the development of systems such as the aquaculture profiles on fish source. He's responsible for the development and the upkeeping of the AIP directory and also seafood metrics for those of you who use this software. So today he's going to talk to us about how AIPs are structured, what are the main steps, and the main things you need to watch out for as you get through these steps. So over to you, Paul, and welcome.
Oh, thanks, Elena. I'm just checking, can you see my presentation?
Yeah, looks good.
Oh, great. Well, hello, everyone. My name's Paul Bulcock. I'm the Aquaculture Improvement Manager at SFP. So today I'm going to present on 6 simple steps, a flexible framework to support aquaculture improvement projects. Hopefully after the last webinar generated interest in aquaculture improvement projects, but with this comes questions such as, how do I start an AIP and what are the steps involved? So that's what I'm here to present on today. Just check, can you see my next slide? Okay.
Not yet, no.
Okay, I'll just try. Sorry, try again. Oh, sorry, just having a few technical difficulties.
No worries. Oh, you need any help, Paul?
Oh yes, sorry, I'm just trying to share screens.
Nothing should have changed from earlier.
Yes.
Sorry, everyone, we're having some technical problems, but I'm sure we're gonna sort it out really quickly. Okay, first slide is up.
Okay, I'll try a different way through PowerPoint.
Okay.
Okay, can you see this? Is it working?
The first, yep, we got it.
Okay, so many apologies for that. Yeah, it's a quick recap about what is an AIP. So basically, it's a group of stakeholders, including market actors, who come together to tackle priority sustainability issues, and all within a specific area, or for example, a water body. Importantly, AIPs should focus on management approaches that address cumulative impacts and shared risks such as disease outbreaks. And this is an approach that can be called a zonal approach, but it's also alternatively can be called landscape or jurisdictional approach. And again, just as a quick reminder from last time, so AIPs can be used to improve habitat regeneration, increase resilience to climate change, and increase supply chain security, but also increase fish welfare issues and improve disease management. Now, one of the questions I get asked quite lots is, what's the difference between an AIP and another acronym here, which is an AMA, or an Aquaculture Management Area? Well, basically, AIP's process. So as a process, it involves steps, and I will go into those steps in the next few slides. And it's a process that can be used to establish an aquaculture management area. And another question I often get asked is, well, why should I form an AIP? And there's various incentives here. I think an important one is an opportunity to lift the environmental performance of multiple farms, and with that it can move farms towards certification standards or adhering to other aquaculture standards. And overall improved management across multiple farms leads to a more stable and secure supply of higher quality seafood. So we're going to get into AIPs, the stages soon, but they're flexible, but there are some essential components. So first of all, it's multi-stakeholder, including market and supply chain actors. AIPs should identify key issues and priorities and have a work plan, and importantly, report on progress and achievements regularly, as this adds credibility to their activities. So when I was putting together this presentation, I spoke to actual AIPs conducting activities in real life and asked them a few questions. First question I asked was, why did you start an AIP? And here are some of their responses. So we've got here, need to tackle sustainability issues, and also that small-scale producers were being left behind. So this translates basically to identifying a need to act, and that's what we refer to as stage 0 APE identification. So once you've identified a need to act, you're ready to move on to stage 1 APE development. And basically, in a nutshell, this involves identifying key sustainability issues, and the stakeholders needed to act upon them. Identifying key issues involves conducting something called a needs assessment or a gap analysis, which is basically identifying the sustainability issues in that area that you're working within. Antonio is going to be presenting a tool soon on, and you can use this potentially as a way to identify issues as part of a needs assessment. And the second part of stage 1 development is identifying key stakeholders. And Trini is going to be presenting on that shortly. And this involves stakeholder mapping. Back to needs assessment. There are various tools, assessments out there, Seafood Watch, but I'd like to introduce the fish source aquaculture profiles. These assess management in various industries across the globe. They identify strengths and weaknesses, and also produce recommendations for improvement. And if you choose to, you can use these as a basis of a needs assessment. So again, when I was speaking to the AIPs themselves, I asked them another question. How do you decide who to involve in an AIP? And here we've got some good responses here. So it's identifying people who are committed, have the passion to get involved, also core players. And also I think importantly is identifying stakeholders who are representative of the industry. So that involves identifying, involving regulators quite often. So you've got your priorities, you've got stakeholders, so you're ready now for stage 2 launch. And again, basically in a nutshell, that involves using the needs assessment to develop recommendations for improvement and the activities that you need to make these recommendations real. And also you need to identify and attach which stakeholders are responsible for these activities. So in a nutshell, that's stage 2 launch, and that involves creating a work plan. So you have your work plan, you're ready to go, you can start, you're ready for stage 3, which is implement, which is basically conducting those activities under your work plan. It's important at this stage to report on progress. So if you report on progress, you're giving credibility to your activities. And so, yeah, that's a very important part of an aquaculture improvement project. I'm going to, at this point, have another question that I've been asked in the past, and it's about funding. You know, how do you fund your AIPs? So again, I reached out to the AIPs and asked them this question, and here are their responses. So it's a mix here. We've got international charity foundations, we've got NGOs, but you also notice we've got private sector representation here. So we've got tech companies and also processing plants. So it'll give you an idea of, of how AIPs are funded. So you've been conducting activities and you've been reporting on progress. So after a period of time, hopefully this will lead to improvements, and improvements under 2 different stages. So first of all, we've got stage 4, improvements in management and also in policy. Now, ideally, these improvements to management and policy will be included in the work plan, but unexpected improvements do and can take place. So you should keep an eye open for these. Also, when you've been conducting activities and you've had changes, you've changed management approach, you've changed policy, Ultimately, these will lead to changes in or improvements rather to environmental, social or economic performance. And again, the intended improvements should be included in a work plan, but unexpected ones can and do take place. So keep an eye open for those. Also very important, like when you report on progress with your activities, also when you have changes, improvements in management or improvements to environmental performance, it's really important to provide evidence of these when you report, as this adds credibility to your AIP activities. Now, just like to say here, don't worry, there's just outline those stages, but we have a tool, we have a platform that you can use, and you can use it to report on progress and report on outputs, and it's called the AIP directory. So like I say, you can report on progress and outputs here, and it also includes guides. You have an AIP toolkit. It also has templates, a work plan. It has a load of resources that you can use to support your AIP. And I have the website here, but also feel free to contact me anytime, and I can give you more of an in-depth walkthrough of the whole tool. But it's there to be used. So yes, feel free to contact me about this. I'd also like to take this opportunity to share some exciting research that I've been involved in recently, and this involves mangrove regeneration, and this has implications for AIPs. So mangroves provide a whole range of ecosystem services, carbon capture, but also coastal protection. And during the course of my research, I found that abandoned ponds provide a setting for mangrove regeneration to take place, but also that active ponds can be adapted to incorporate mangroves into their design. And this is great at an individual pond or farm basis, but to be impactful, to maximize benefits and to reduce mangrove fragmentation, ideally this should take place across all ecosystems or landscapes. And this provides a really exciting new opportunity for a new activity to be included under AIPs. I will be sharing more information on this in forthcoming webinars and SFP website, but again, if you're interested, feel free to reach out to me anytime. Finally, I would like to share a few lessons learned. I reached out to the AIPs with a whole heap of questions, and one of them was, what are your lessons learned and what would you like to share with the audience? So here are some of their responses. In summary, you're working with a large group of multiple stakeholders in a relatively new approach. So this involves generating trust, and generating trust takes time. Also, a key finding is that you need to identify stakeholders who have the influence and the capacity to drive an AIP forward. So in effect, you're looking for improvement project champions, which I think is one of the phrases given by the AIPs, which I think is very, very apt. So yeah, those are a few of the key lessons learned. And finally, I'd like to leave you with my contact details. So feel free to reach out anytime, and we can talk about AIPs, the AIP directory, and mangrove regeneration. And also, I apologize for that slight delay in the presentation. I'll hand you over to Elena. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. The presentation was very clear, and I'm sure this breakdown in steps is gonna help people understand what to expect. So if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. We are gonna go through the other two speakers first, but then we're gonna get back to the questions and answers time at the end of the presentation. So you can just leave them there, and then we'll get to it. Okay, so we are moving on to our second speaker, and I would like to introduce Trini Pratiwi. She has 10 years of experience in sustainable aquaculture and seafood value chain development. She works at the Asian Seafood Improvement Collaborative, which is often referred to as ASIC, but she is also the co-lead of an initiative called A Greener Blue by the Lexicon. In both of these roles, her role is really to leverage the support from seafood producers to increase the adoption of best practices and to support sustainable livelihoods on the ground. So she is really the perfect person to talk to us about the importance of stakeholder engagement and some ways and tools that we can use to catalyze this collaboration. So over to you, Trini, and welcome to this webinar.
Thank you so much, Helena. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. So continuing from what Paul mentioned about stakeholder mapping, I would like to share some of the stories or project that we have here from ASIC about how to identify stakeholders and how to create multi-stakeholders AIP, Aquaculture Improvement Program. So what are these stakeholders here we refer to? It's actually any public-private key organization, groups, individuals that related to your program, related to your supply chain and value chain. It can be cross countries, it can create connection, and also, most importantly, they would have influencing power and decision-making in the regency, in the value chain or supply chain, as well as diverse expertise and areas coverage that can help you throughout the journey of doing AIP. Building a new AIP is not a short progress one, but rather it's a long one. Usually it takes about 2 years or more, and issues and challenges are complex. So that's why it's not all about farming practices issues, but more into governance, more into maybe climate change, other risks that are bigger to burden for one company only. And this is why we need to collaborate with other partners. And it aims to work together and spread out tasks towards one goal and then reduce the risk, which then at the end of the program, we hope that the investment towards the regency or towards the commodity can be improved. There are several tools that we can identify stakeholders that I think most of the people here are familiar with, but I would like to share briefly to you again how we identify stakeholders from ASIC. We use a stakeholder mapping, partner assessment, and then self-assessment against what will be the goal. And then this is the stakeholder mapping. Take example on the left on general monitoring shrimp farming at the central of supply and demand, and then we map out issues at the top and then what regulations or standards that we need on the bottom. And then taking sample of the livelihood here, and then narrowing down into what goal you would like to solve, and then narrowing it down into what issues and regulations regarding the livelihood, why the livelihood is not as expected as now, and then how or what are the activities we could include to improve the livelihood of farmers, so that maybe production or something else improve in the area, and then product quality can be also improved, and everyone's going to be benefited. The stakeholder mapping that the simple exercise will need you to rely heavily on data that should be accessible for everyone. So again, mentioning with Paul, referring into track progress, report the progress. This is when we need to have data heavily on the program, and then you will be able to track the progress when you need to. Again, not only about farming, but you also need to consider about governance, social environment, and most importantly, when you create a stakeholder list, you need a work plan together, an agreement to set up how much each partner will commit and adhere to the work plan. And then this is just a simple exercise on after you list up the stakeholder listed based on the process before, you can take priority on which stakeholders should be involved, listing their types, strengths, resources, and then ideally every single stakeholder should be able to contribute. And if there is any opportunity to have a buyers or end buyers involved, that would be also a good point, because then you will make a direct market link that can help farmers and processing plant improve better and maybe faster. And I think lastly, combination between public, private, and non-profit sometimes really useful to fill the gaps, to exactly spread out the tasks, spread out the expertise, and then move forward with the one goal and work plan that you agreed on. Lastly, also, then you would need to do a self-assessment aside from the partner assessment against what goal you would need to go. I think learning from Fisheries Improvement Program and some of the AIP, or maybe some of the program that we see, if certification, then you need to take self-assessment against the standard, or if it's for production or governance, then maybe baseline or self-assessment against that simple metrics will also do. This is an example of how differentiated between conventional and AIP stakeholder approach. When purchasing from farmers, usually buyers would go to processing plant. Sometimes they may or they may not have a connection directly to farmers. And also without connection directly to farmers, maybe traceability, or if there is any input on recommendation to improve the product will not be there. By having a multi-stakeholder AIP, we can define structure on the ground from area management to the private, public, civil society collaboration, and then setting up agreement and setting up goals. Most importantly, multi-stakeholder also share the burden and the risk to different parties, and then hopefully then within 2 years or more, you can progress well, and then you can track every single stakeholders, what are their contribution into. About setting up AIP goals that I mentioned before, you need to laser focus on what exactly goals that you were working into. These are several examples that you can look up in addition to having a new sourcing area, or in addition to having a new product volumes that go into your buying power. These are the issues that we usually see in the field. So productivity, traceability, climate change resilience, farmers' livelihood, social accountability, and mangrove as well. And an AIP must articulate impact and improvement goals so that it can be executed within short and long term. And I guess learning from our experience, moving towards certification standards compliance is often not enough. So you need to also look out what are the issues, what are the needs for these stakeholders for this area to be improved. Because again, sometimes the issues are not only relying on or relied on farming challenges, but sometimes even way bigger than that. And then you would also need to translate your impact and improvement goals into what type of stakeholders you should involve to, timeline, work plan, and then supply chain linkages. So taking example of how ASIC have done in several years, this is some of the example of farmers profile and location. We have in India, we have in Indonesia, Thailand, Vietnam, Myanmar, Philippines, for both aquaculture and fisheries small scale. Receive support to improve their practices towards ASIC, because ASIC has their own standards that are custom to Asian context, Asian characteristic, against environmental and social and gender. And then we build the improvement plan to ensure small-scale producers progressing towards on-track target reporting and technical improvement also about farming and fishing practices, as well as then connect them if there are any possibility and interest from processor and buyers to connect directly with the producer and can set up a sourcing area, can purchase from them, and then connect them in a long-term market engagement access. This is an example of how we take one example from Indonesia, from case studies that we work with PT Athena and on monodon small scale in Sidoarjo and in Pindrang, with the help from Oxfam, COIN, Continue, all the local NGOs and all the supply chain actors, according to Farmers Association, hatcheries, input supplier, trader, and buyer, as well as local government, because we need to build a clustered area, farmers groups. We need to also work with them on the how best managing the area, how best to solve the issues, the risk in the farming, modern farming in the area. And then we connect we connect them with the end buyer that we have. So we run a series of culinary events in the Netherlands to bring the products to Netherlands market. We have our international culinary partners here. So we have actually the products go to Netherlands restaurants in a few months back, yielding all more than 400 menus created. And they also mentioned that the products are good, taste good, and beautiful to feature, really tasty. And it's really an example of how processing company as a lead here for AIP can lead into building a whole through from supply chain actors, from local governments, from implementing partners, as well as connecting to buyer. And then lastly, I would like to share with you again about what in AIP, the lead could be various between nonprofit organization, or it could be local government, maybe it could be a processor in our case here. So setting up sort of from product improvement, processor can lead influential AIP that coordinates farmers on the ground and also provide direct training and monitoring to them so that farmers don't feel alone, don't feel they don't get any support from surrounding stakeholders. They would get more enhancement and more knowledge on how to do farming better, and also can discuss with the stakeholders how to improve. And for processor, the benefit is they get a trusted partner to supply harvest for farmers from farmers, and then have the loyalty from them to continue supply harvest to the one company, and coordinating farmers by grouping so that traceability, transparency is there. If there is a product quality improvement needed by the buyers, they could easily track to which area, which sub area the product comes from, and then what's needed for farmers to improve. And then for end buyer, engagement directly with farmers, connection to improvement of product quality, as well as they could also say that this is aligned with their commitment on sustainability goals, sustainability actions, as well as they can monitor the progress. And I think that's all from my side. We are based in Singapore, but we are working in different countries. I'm here based in Indonesia. I think my fellows based in the Philippines, and our managing director based in Canada. This work has been successful by Oxfam Gracie to support. Over to you, Elena.
Thank you, Trini. I think you really brought a really strong view of what you guys see from being on the ground, and why having processing plants in the private sector leading can really create those incentives, right, for farmers to do a better work is not the right sentence, but to make the effort of adopting new practices. We do have some questions for you in the chat, which we're going to get back to after our next presentation, who is going to be presented by Antonio Santamarta from Longline Environment. So I would like to introduce Antonio. He is the aquaculture expert at Longline Environment, and his expertise is in supply chain traceability in Indonesia, in Thailand, and in the Philippines. Antonio has also worked extensively with aquaculture insurances in risk management and in environmental modeling of aquaculture in the Americas, in the Middle East, and in Africa. And he's going to talk to us about how modern technologies can really play a key role in assessing and tracking some of the work that AIPs can perform. So welcome, Antonio, and over to you.
Hi, Elena. Thanks a lot. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I think Elena introduced me very well. I don't need to add anything else. On the contrary, we haven't worked in implementing, Longline hasn't worked in implementing AIP projects on the ground, but we've been developing very interesting tools to manage aquaculture systems instead, and that are very very good fits for AIPs. So the presentation is divided in 3 parts. I'm going to start by explaining a bit what aquaculture management areas are. Some of the tools we developed, which is the main one is Aquascape, that is looking into some of these issues, and then some case studies. Starting with aquaculture management areas. Why use aquaculture management areas? This, following the same thread of thought in AIPs, really provide the support into linking into solving different issues within ecosystem. So protecting coastal systems to reduce risks for aquaculture investors, to reduce and to minimize the conflicts between different users of natural resources like fishermen and aquaculture farmers. You really are a great support to improve data collection. I'm going to go into that in a bit. Managing the water bodies. It's much easier to report to investors, to report to insurers by using tools like this, and empower local communities. So Aquascape addresses different types of issues, and looking at aquaculture management areas specifically, these are meant to be looking into small areas that have a lot of connectivity, environmental connectivity, which means that they share problems. And these problems are much better managed as a group rather than individual farm by farm. This includes disease and production losses by establishing disease alert systems, eutrophication, carrying capacity. This is a problem that should be looked at the ecosystem level, and by different farmers, by establishing goals for how much they should be producing, how the water quality should be looking at. What do they want together as a group in terms of goals for habitat disturbances, how they want to keep, what's the area of mangroves that they're aiming at, conservation of coral reefs, etc. Looking at climate change resilience, maybe establish a mangrove barrier to support this resilience and so forth, and biosecurity and access to market investment. All these things are much better looked at as a group rather than at the individual farm. So the process to get an aquaculture management area in place there's several steps. And this on the right, these little boxes are some aquaculture management areas we drafted for East Java and Bali for a project in 2019, 2020. And the process should include the stakeholder consultation. We should take into consideration administrative areas and its boundaries so that it falls into the same sort of regulation. Incoming and outgoing channels. So if farmers are using the same channels, chances are they share the same problems in terms of disease and water quality again. Catchment areas. So they're also going to share the same problem. So problems coming from upstream. If there's some pollution coming from rivers and so forth. And of course, water connectivity. If you're in the same bay, for instance, chances are the problems are going to stay within the same bay, depending on the currents and that kind of stuff. So jumping into the tools we've developed, Aquascape is our magical tool for this. It's an environmental intelligence tool that really aims to transform the way we manage aquaculture globally. So the idea is Aquascape really wants to transform the way we capture data, we view it, the way we analyze it. And it does that by using a lot of data. We've collected more than 2.5 million, we've mapped more than 2.5 million ponds globally, and anywhere from Indonesia to Ecuador. And we have a lot of key metrics that are very useful for all types of stakeholders, including the government, supply chain, insurance, and finance. And I'm going to go a bit more into detail of how this works. So I'm going to go over this quickly in terms of the details of what we have so far in Aquascape. Worldwide, we mapped, as I said, 2.5 million ponds across 24 countries. And of this 2.5 million, 1 million are classified. That means that for 1 million ponds, we know which ones are inactive, active, intensive production, extensive production, and so forth. And we have done this for Indonesia, India, and Thailand so far. And our most complete data set by far is Indonesia, where we, besides all of this, we have 500,000 ponds, more or less, and we cover the whole country. And for each pond, we have defined the pond classification. So for like 90% of them, we know the species produced. We have a production algorithm that allows us to estimate the production in every single pond and the footprint coming from every single pond and the unique ID for every single pond. So this really, when you are looking into a massive data set like this, it becomes really useful, very fast, using all the analytics we have. So you can look at, with aquaculture management areas, you can really, which is one of the features we use in Microscape, you can aggregate stuff like licensing, carrying capacity. You can visualize how much nutrients are coming from different players. That includes urban sources, that includes also farms, agriculture, and all that kind of stuff, to really tackle these issues properly and make informed decisions. So this is, again, the sketch from an old version of Aquascape, where we used the conceptual aquaculture management areas in Bali and Java. And so going very quickly over all the features, we can tackle disease monitoring. It goes into manage watering, water quality. We can look into different species, and you can really query the system to ask the different questions, like how much, for instance, in Indonesia, you could be looking into how many intensive farms are there in East Java? What's the total production coming out of extensive farms? How many inactive ponds are there? Which ones have certification? If you choose to, then you can choose to add all sorts of data that you can monitor and analyze it in this big data set and really make it readable. We can also look into mangroves and other conservation areas with aquaculture layers and overlap all of that, and which produces very interesting information. I'm going to go into that in a second. So this is a mock-up. Aquascape is going to be coming out in 1 or 2 months. I think Rui is on the call, he can confirm that. How it's going to look, because I showed you an old sketch. And very quickly, about the case studies. Catchment models can be adapted to Aquascape, for instance, and that becomes very useful very fast. Where you can combine these with the aquaculture models, you can compare and really inform decision makers. You can look into how much nutrients are coming from urban centers, from agriculture, from shrimp farms, from industry, and all of these adds up, and you can analyze where to address certain issues. If there's an issue in the water system, how to address these issues and where to regulate, and not just blame aquaculture if the case is that the pollution is coming from urban sources. So this is a print screen from a model we use from a SWOT model. A colleague of mine did for East Java, and for this we calculated the production coming from every single type of source, like urban, agriculture, forestry, and all of this. And we could actually, for each of the carrying capacity areas, analyze individually a pie chart like this. What's the percentage of nitrogen coming into the coastline for each type of area: natural areas, annual crops, permanent crops, wastewater, and so forth. Another use we have for Aquascape is to linking into what Trini and Paul said about mangroves, is to combine the mapping of these with shrimp ponds. You can overlay them. We can overlay them and quantify what's the area of mangroves, and quantify these over time, and really keep track of how this is evolving. This is a map showing some ponds, inactive ponds, where the mangroves are, where the extensive ponds are. This is in Vietnam somewhere, and this becomes very useful when you are looking at year by year how these things are evolving very fast. You can also look into stuff like certification and the species being produced and so forth. And so to close, just the idea is really that Aquascape can provide the digital infrastructure to support this aquaculture improvement projects worldwide. We have the infrastructure for that. We have all the ponds. You just need to fill up the information and register every single pond. As you start having a lot of these projects worldwide, it very quickly becomes difficult to analyze them individually. And looking at Aquascape, you can very quickly report to farmers, give access to different stakeholders, and keep track of different environmental metrics. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonio. Some really cool images that you showed in your presentation. Okay, so we are at the end of the presentation time, and we already have some questions that were asked by our participants from the first presentation when Paul was talking. And really the first question was from Ian Pollard. Ian, if you're still on the call, you're very welcome to take the microphone and ask your question directly.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. So my question was just whether SFP will be rating apes. I had a quick look at the website. I didn't see any ratings on there, but whether there were any plans. It's something we get asked about on FIPS quite a lot. I was just wondering whether it was part of the planning.
That's definitely a question for Paul.
And it's also another question I should have. Yeah, the short answer is not right now. I totally understand the incentives that progress ratings provide, certainly for encouraging apes to report regularly. There's currently 10 apes, and they do report against those stages I outlined. So that's almost like our pseudo progress, just reporting, stage 3, 4, or 5. But yeah, the short answer is not quite yet. When we get what we refer to as a critical amount of apes, so maybe a couple of dozen, we'll definitely give it some thought. Having said all that, you'll notice that apes are based on FIPS, the stages. It's basically very, very, very similar. And I also know that we have FIP progress ratings, so we will utilize those FIP progress ratings to produce ape progress ratings. That's almost 100% certain of that. But short answer is yes, not quite now, but it's something we're always thinking about.
Yeah, and just to make sure I understand your question, you're referring to not just the rating of, which is not really a rating, not just the description of the stage, the APZ, but the actual progress through the stages. Is that what you were looking for?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so we often see commitments coming out that buyers will source from FIPS with a particular progress rating, which there's a SFP methodology follows through to see from when the FIP starts to when it reports, and then gives it an 8E rating. So just I think it makes sense what Paul said. So just I guess it's just a matter of time then when it comes.
Yeah, I mean, there's other ways of tracking progress of apes, and we're going to cover that in our next webinar on the 1st of December. So we'll have a company that has a tracking tool, and that's one of the ways, which is not harmonized across users of apes, but that's one of the things that can be done in the interim, as we develop a system that is the same for everyone. Then we have another really good question from, I hope to pronounce his name right, from Prad Kertpairoy. Prad, if you are still on the call and you want to ask your question about social sustainability in apes, you're very welcome to do so. And I think Srini is your woman for this kind of question.
Yes, actually, two questions to both the first two speakers. I think the first speaker, Paul, mentioned that apes also used to address social sustainability related challenge. So I want to find, what are some good examples of apes focusing on social issues, that farms don't, cannot address alone, or that would benefit from farms working collective together in apes.
Oh, I can certainly, with the go in first. When you're creating apes and forming apes, what I like to think of it as you're forming almost like a pseudo producer organization. You're getting multiple farms to come together, and with that, sort of increasing the collaboration and almost a collective leverage. If you go to the ape directory, there's one ape called the Hainan Tilapia Sustainability Alliance, and that is basically that brought multiple farmers who were operating individually together, and through time and through several years, that's given them almost a common voice. So when I'm talking of social impacts, yeah, I'm kind of specifically referring to sort of the benefits to the farmers themselves and the sort of social collective coming together. But it's certainly something I would like to keep an eye on, and I'm certainly convinced that it's definitely has advantages, social advantages to bringing farmers together.
Is there anything you want to add, Trini?
Very cool. Yeah. So social accountability, social issues, I think it can be both, as Paul mentioned, about when it comes to farms and also processing plant, depending on what type of challenges you're trying addressing into. For farms, exactly what farmers needs to be getting benefit from in their livelihood. So their income, their continuity of doing farming, as well as their stability of household farming. Another thing that could be also include is women economic empowerment around the community, gender equality. And when it comes to also local communities, I think mostly our producers, aquaculture and fisheries comes from smallholders. And sometimes our program or purchase track is not something linked directly to communities. So how these programs can benefit also for communities, as well as, together in a multi-stakeholder approach, you can protect of the environment and also benefit all the people involved. And when it comes to, I think, processing plant and also fisheries, it can go into fair recruitment, freedom of association, equality in fair wages, and so on. So there are also a lot of issues in social gender norms within farms, within farming community that cannot be solved by one farm only.
Thank you, Trini. And I've popped in the chat the link to the ape in Hainan that Paul referred to, if anyone wants to read about it a little bit more. There was another question from Jessica Sutandi. Jessica, if you're still there, you're welcome to join us and ask your question. And please introduce yourself briefly so that we know who we're talking to.
Yes, hello, hi, nice to meet you. Thank you all for your very informative presentations. I'm Jessica. I work in Delos Aqua as the Sustainability and Impact Officer. I was just wondering about how the private sector, or specifically the production or like the farmers, could be subjects or leaders in apes as well. I saw in Trini's presentation that the processing and NGOs could lead the apes, but is there any, I was wondering if from the farm, the production sector, like we could also take charge in or like lead AIPs?
Great
Yeah.
question, Jessica. Can I take that, Trini?
Yes, so I think, again, in the multi-stakeholders, everyone needs to be sitting in the same room, deciding which part, which goal that we need to tackle, what are the work plans, because AIP is not a very short one. I think minimum from our experience is 2 years. It's really long. And about improving, about maybe even setting up from zero to something and creating something new. And also maybe using tools like what Antonio mentioned to something or region that is completely not yet adapted tools that can only go not in the short term, but also long term in a way that might be more than 2 years. So stakeholders need to decide which partner should be the lead of that. I think farmers would be also welcome to, if they have the capacity, if they have the structure, governance structure, for example, if it's coming from association or farmers groups that are more, having more resources and having people on the board to keep track progress and to keep, follow up with everyone, that would be also perfect. The example that we gave is also coming from processing plan, that I think giving more leverage, because then farmers can focus on farming. Processing plan and an NGO can work together to regroup them, to make a clustering, and then help giving training and consultancy so that they can improve. I think in that Hainan example also consists of several companies, several of associations that work together in a code of conduct. So companies or a group of companies can also work together, setting a roadmap, setting a code of conduct for their industry within a certain area, and then list out what stakeholders involved. So it's actually depending on what type of resources, what type of influence and willingness to improve.
Thank you, Trini. We have time for one more question if anyone has one. I think you can raise your hand and yeah, I will give you a minute to see if there's any more questions. If not, we're going to wrap up the session for today. Okay, I think we've come to the end of this webinar. And so I would really like to thank you, our three fabulous speakers, who I hope you will appreciate. They've brought an incredible wealth of expertise in this hour. I hope you have enjoyed the webinar, and I will now ask you to please complete a super quick poll that will help us understand how helpful this webinar has been. And also, before we close, I would like to remind you that there's going to be a third webinar on the 1st of December. And in that webinar, we're going to be talking about traceability and tracking of AIPs, which I know is a topic that's really important for some of the buyers. I'm going to launch the webinar now. Please don't leave before filling it in. Okay, I think that's the end of the poll, and I'm glad to hear that 96% of you has found this webinar helpful. So thank you very much and have a good morning or a good evening, depending on where you are. Goodbye, everyone.